Hello, everybody. Hi, guys. Welcome to our event for our New Voters Fellows. My name is Genevieve Rao. I am the president and founder of New Voters, and I'm super excited to have you guys here with us today. As some of you may know, hopefully all of you know, New Voters is a student-led 501c3 organization with the goal of making the youth voice heard in politics. So what does this mean in practice? So we match every student leader with a personal mentor. Many of you already have this, who walks them step by step through running a voter registration drive at their school to ensure 100% civic engagement, just to make sure, like our voices deserve to be heard. The decisions being made today affect us more than any other. So that's super critical. And you guys are, creating this change in your communities. But as a part of being a fellow isn't like a one-time thing. It's not just a tick, it's an opportunity to, really make change in your community and gain really valuable skills. So you also have a policy consultant who will help you run an advocacy campaign of your choice, run a vaccine hesitancy drive, etc. But additionally, you get super awesome skill building workshops and the opportunity to hear from really amazing speakers, such as our esteemed guest today, Diane. So I have a little bit to say about Diane to introduce her, but Diane Hesson is an award-winning entrepreneur and innovator in the market research field, is a nationally recognized expert on the American voter. She is a member of the Boston Globe Editorial Board and has written extensively about the choices of the electorate. She is the founder and chairman of C-Space, which is the first company to leverage social media for consumer insights. And she received her BA from Tufts University. Why did I become British? Her BA from Tufts University and her MBA from Harvard Business School. Wait, I didn't know that. But it's awesome. So hi, Diane, and hello to all of our fellows. If you don't know me, please message me. Happy to chat. I am a rising senior at Harvard College. I went through the college app process. I do research. Happy to chat with anything with any of you. We're resources for you. So I'm going to pass it over to Diane and Abby. I'm going to spotlight both of them, but super excited to hear this conversation.
Great. Abby, do you want me to just take it away, or do you have some things you want to say first?
No, I just we wanted to talk a little bit today about your new book, Our Common Ground, which you've written over the past 4 years, interviewing voters from all across America. And we just wanted you to give us a little bit of background on that book.
Sure. So, all right, let's see. I have, I'm not really, I don't really consider myself a politics person or a policy person, but I spent most of the last 20 years building a technology company where we tried to completely transform the way that companies could listen to their consumers. We built software that helped, like if Coca-Cola wanted to listen to consumers in high school, we knew how to build basically an online community of hundreds and hundreds of those young consumers all over the world. And basically, via the tech platform, we would be constantly asking questions, asking them to share their lives, their dreams, their frustrations, all of that stuff. And the brands would get great insight. And the people who were in the community would love really having a voice in what was happening with the brand. So it was kind of disruptive to focus groups. Like, why do a focus group and put 10 people in a room for an hour when you can use technology and have access to lots and lots of people? The company got big, and I was the CEO and founder for about 15 years. And it was fun. And I loved being in the market research space because it's super fun to surprise brands with insights about what's going on in the lives of the people who are writing them checks and buying their products. I left, we sold the company. I decided I wanted to try something a little more mission driven. I was running an education company. And one day my phone rang, and it was a friend of mine who was very high up in the Clinton campaign. This was in 2016. And he said, Diane, it's been a while. I just want to pick your brain. I'm just wondering, we have all of this data. We know a lot about what is happening in the country, but we don't understand a lot about why. And I'm just wondering whether you could give me some ideas. And we were talking for hours. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, this is really crazy, but would you ever think about leaving your job and coming to do a project for the Clinton campaign? And I did. I mean, after 20 years of running companies, I gave my board 90 days notice, and I went from having, hundreds and, 700 employees and my numbers and my venture capitalists and all that stuff to basically sitting alone in my office trying to understand why a voter would ever be undecided between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And that I did a project there. I used the same technology and the same methods as I did helping brands understand consumers. And I got a whole group of people and was talking to them. And whenever I learned something new, I'd send the insights into the Clinton campaign. So it was really exciting and at times really frustrating. But when the election was over, before I jumped into another job, I decided to just write an article for the Boston Globe. This is around Thanksgiving of 2016. I decided to write an article for the Boston Globe, basically saying, here's what I've been doing, and here's what I learned, and here's what I think it means. And the article was called Understanding the Undecided Voter. And in that article, I basically said that although the conventional wisdom was that everything flipped for Donald Trump when Comey came out and said, we have email problems again, that the primary reason that undecided voters, the moment that decided voters switched to Trump was most significantly when Hillary Clinton was making a speech and said that she thought that you could put half of Trump supporters into a basket of deplorables. People went crazy. They thought it was super elitist. They started calling themselves proud deplorables. I'm like sending notes to the campaign and all that, but I wrote an article about it. And the article went viral for a bunch of reasons that I don't have time to describe to all of you. But all of a sudden I'm on CNN and MSNBC and their Wall Street Journal's calling everything. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm making more of a difference after the election than before. So instead of taking another CEO job, I decided to structure my life so that I could spend at least 20 hours a week doing more voter research. So I joined a bunch of boards, I do a bunch of angel investing, et cetera. But I created a whole new online community, this time of 500 people, all points along the political spectrum, from extremely liberal all the way through to extremely conservative. Every age, every state, every gender, every ethnicity, etc. And I was off and running. I didn't really have a major plan or a set of goals, but to make a long story short, I talked to this group of people every single week for 4.5 years. And whenever I learned anything interesting, I would write a column about it for the Boston Globe. And this past year, and well, actually this summer, my book came out, which I just ran over and got, but here it is, Our Common Ground, Insights from 4 years of Listening to American Voters. And I basically wrote this book to kind of tie together everything that I had learned about the electorate and what I thought it meant and what I thought we should do about it. So let me try to just net out a couple of things. I'd just rather talk with all of you and take whatever kinds of questions you have. But there are a couple of things that I learned that I think were most surprising as I went through this. The first is, which is why I entitled the book Our Common Ground. When it comes to policy, there is generally much more common ground than you would think in the US. So if you ask voters about the issues, immigration, gun control, healthcare, infrastructure, etc., you can literally get 80% of Americans to be willing to compromise on a particular solution. So for instance, you can get 80% of our country to agree on an immigration bill that gives the dreamers of half the citizenship, builds a physical wall in some parts of the southern border, increases humanitarian treatment for arriving migrants, adds more screening resources and tech at our borders, and so on. They might not all think it's their perfect bill, but they would be fine with it. But the legislation doesn't pass. And one of the reasons for that is that many of our elected leaders are just better off with no resolution. I mean, it's just easier to be a Republican and scream and yell that immigrants are pouring into our country and elect me and I will stop them, or to be a progressive and make the case for immigration and compassion and say that you'll make sure that no child is ever again put in a cage, et cetera. So the act of resolving the issue takes talking points away. And so we perceive we agree on nothing, but I have story after story in the book, a card carrying member of the NRA who believes that in most gun control, all of the sane gun control regulation, that you'd think he wouldn't believe in, from making sure that no one on the terrorist watch list can carry a gun to making sure there's some kind of identity card that people have, et cetera. I mean, it's just incredible how much people are willing to compromise and move forward on policy. And the second thing is that we have perceptions. We think our country's so divided, but we're divided because we have perceptions created by the media, created by our congressional leaders, whatever. But we have perceptions of the other side that are really inaccurate. So, for instance, if you ask most Republicans about the Democratic Party, they will say Democrats are a bunch of elitist socialists who want to take my hard-earned tax dollars and give them away to criminals and illegal immigrants and people who are too lazy to work. And they want to take away guns and they want to allow women to use abortion as birth control, and who want to completely dismantle policing. Or if you ask most Democrats about Republicans, they will say that they're a bunch of hypocritical, uneducated deplorables who sleep with their guns and refuse to wear masks and deny that climate change is happening and never met a Black person they liked. And both of those are inaccurate, but these stereotypes were on the ballot in our country in 2020, and they dominate our perspectives. I mean, I've got 500 voters in my panel. I would say that about 20 of them, in my view, are pretty awful. But the other 480 care about their families. They're not super radical. They don't have crazy views of the world, and they're just trying to get by. I could talk about a million more things. I can talk about, the issues like the economy or foreign policy or voter fraud. I can talk about use of language or what the times are that people are actually really captivated by. But let me just stop for a minute and give you a chance to actually ask some questions.
Yeah, so we had and actually before I begin, I'm gonna drop in the chat the link to Diane's website where you can buy the book and
buy it for your parents.
Yes.
Your
for the whole
grandparents.
family.
Thanksgiving.
No,
No
it's a
pressure.
fantastic gift.
It is funny. I've talked to a lot of young people and everybody says, I'm giving this to my parents. All they do is scream and yell, right? We can't get anything done in this country. It is kind of funny. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's definitely a great book because I'm sure many of you feel the way we're like watching the news is always kind of like a letdown because it just feels like everything is so divided right now. So I think this is really a bright light right now. I think it's a really great read. I personally have it on the way in the mail, so I have not read it yet, full disclosure, but we had a couple questions from our Instagram for Diane. They are a little bit about the book and a little bit about your career as well. So the first one we had is advice on bridging the partisan divide and what role young people have in that.
Yeah. Well, the whole last chapter of the book basically says, okay, now you know where people agree and don't agree, and you're now an expert on what's going on in the country across lots and lots of different issues. Now, what do we do? And most of my last chapter is about how we need to change the way we have conversations with each other. So what I try to do is kind of pull apart what it really means to listen to each other. So let's just take an issue like voter fraud. Voter fraud is really, really interesting because, it's so front and center right now in our country. My data basically says that half of the Republicans who voted for Trump believe that there was voter fraud in November of 2020, and that therefore Biden might not be a legitimate president. That's 35 million Americans feel that way. I don't know, maybe there's somebody on this Zoom call who feels that way, but it's 35 million people. If you believe that the election was legit, as I do, how do you deal with somebody who says, I think there was fraud in the election? Most of the time, we show them how smart we are. We send them videos, excuse me, we send them articles, we give them our favorite statistic. Our favorite statistic is 50 out of 51. 50 out of 51 voter fraud cases were thrown out by the judges, as they were brought up. I mean, we've got all of that proof. What I've learned is that of the 35 million people who think there was voter fraud, at least 30 million of them have already read those articles and they've heard 50 out of 51 and they're still not happy and they still believe there's fraud. And the only way we could really deal with that is just to say, okay, I really, really want to understand this. Tell me more. Why do you think there's fraud? Right? Where did you read this? What else? What else? What else? And as you do that, things shift. Number one, whenever you have conversations like that, number one, you learn things that you didn't know before about what the issue was. Number two, you create an environment where usually if you're really listening hard to somebody, at some point they'll say, by the way, what do you think? Right? And what's your reaction to that? But just getting that kind of data does one really, really important thing that we need to do in this country, which is that we've got to turn the heat down. Because I thought things were divisive early in the summer when I was getting ready for this book to come out. And I really think that they're worse now. I mean, people are the media is crazy. I just can't even listen to anybody. They're just all screaming and yelling and talking about how the other side is so horrible. And it really accomplishes very little. So there's a lot in there about listening. When I listen to people who believe there was voter fraud, there are a few really interesting issues that come out. One is they feel that the people who are happy with the election have been really dismissive. So think about it. We thought there was a problem. In other parts of our government. And, we put commissions together and we put Comey in charge and we spend billions of dollars trying to investigate things. But here, somebody thinks there's a major issue that's called fraud. And there are 50 really little minor local cases coming up, but no one federally does anything. There's not a commission on how to transform the way we vote. There's not anybody really, really investigating things. So one is that people feel belittled. They feel like no one's taking them seriously. The second thing I found out is that when you talk to people who believe there was fraud, there's one primary issue more than anything else, and that is that they are concerned about mail-in voting. And in particular, they're worried about mail-in voting in situations in which you can actually send your vote in without having to prove that you are the person whose name is on the ballot. And the third thing you find out is that this is not people going, I love Donald Trump, therefore I think there was fraud. These people have done lots and lots of research, just like, for instance, I've done lots of research. Lastly, there are a lot of young people that think that the voting system is a mess. So they figure fraud has to happen because why are we still filling out paper and filling in little holes, with a pencil and then putting it into a weird looking machine that looks like it was built, in the 1950s or whatever? How come we can't leverage technology to make voting more secure and faster and more equitable and all of those things? So you do have a lot of young people saying, I don't know if there's fraud, but the system is an absolute mess. So all that's conversation that you can do something with. You can't do something with conversation that's up here going, there was fraud, there wasn't fraud. He's legitimate, he's not legitimate, or whatever else. But when you listen to each other and you have conversations, you start saying, wow, this is actually something that we can deal with, where we can actually come together and have a solution. And it happens on, in lots and lots of other areas also.
I definitely think that's advice many people could take and hopefully use in their own lives. I'm sure it'd be very valuable in any political conversation that I'm sure any of us will have in the near future. And the next question we have is a little bit of a shift, kind of a different topic. It's how do you get into journalism, and what advice do you have for students who want to pursue a career in this field?
Uh, well, look, I got into journalism in a weird way, which is that after I had done 30, 40 years of being a CEO, I wrote an article and people really liked it. And all of a sudden, there I am as kind of the one outsider on the Globe Editorial Board. And, I just started, I was literally the equivalent of a freelance writer. I never got a paycheck from the Globe with benefits taken out and, all those things people get every time I wrote an article. They would pay me basically as a freelancer. And I think I just got to the point where they thought that I had a perspective that nobody else had. I will say that I think being in journalism is tough, right? Um, I There were a lot of people that I worked with and met in journalism who were, number one, who were really overworked and underpaid, and who were not super, super thrilled, with the work they were doing. I was coming from the world of startups where I was kind of surrounded by people who were all excited about a new idea they had, or, all sitting around trying to figure out how to build a business and how to come up with a business model. And people were always kind of full of energy and full of passion and like fast. I mean, like really moving forward and trying to make things happen. And my personal experience, this is not a comment on the Globe because I love the Globe and I think it's a great paper. But my experience in journalism was that it was slow, that it was political, that there were a lot of unhappy people who, to me, were brilliant, who could have been paid more. It's a tough business model. But the people who I know who were really successful it's all they've ever wanted to do. And they start at the bottom and they write and they research and all of that. And then they write again and then they edit and they take every possible job. And after 20, 30, 40 years, they've kind of worked their way up. There are people who kind of get lucky, they get discovered or whatever. The other thing going on in journalism that's interesting is that there are a lot of new jobs now. So like the Globe has a guy who's a data scientist. And he's one of the youngest people that I interacted with on the editorial board. But what he did was, somebody would say, wow, so we've got that voter fraud issue. Could we pull some data together and create a map of the United States so that our readers could see where are the voters who believe there is fraud? Or where were those 50 out of 51 cases? Or what are the other opportunities for us to actually use data to illuminate stories for our readers? And I think so there are new jobs that are coming out in news that are really, really interesting, but it's literally networking, somebody who is, high up in a newspaper is speaking at an event, get yourself there, come up with a good question, figure out a way to get an internship and, get in there and just start slogging away.
And also, we have one more question from our Instagram, but I also want to let if anybody in the audience has any questions and like doesn't feel comfortable speaking, just direct message
In the
me.
chat.
Yeah, or me or Johnny, or just put it in the chat. We just want to hear all your questions as well. But we have one final one from our Instagram, and that is, what was the biggest challenge when writing your book?
The biggest challenge is you just really, really need a lot of discipline. I mean, it's hard. I mean, think about how you feel. I'm sure you all write a lot of papers. I mean, think about you have all this stuff in your head, and then you sit down and it's time to actually put on paper what you've learned. And I think staring at that blank piece of paper and saying, what's my vision of what this is going to be? And how am I going to structure the thing? And actually sitting down and doing it is really hard. And I was doing the equivalent of writing a paper or two every single day to get to the point where I could create whatever it is. If I include the appendix, it's more than 250 pages. Well, I'll tell you what I did is I decided to create some discipline. So I got up every morning. I had other things going on in my life, boards, all of that. So I got up every single morning, thanks to COVID, because I was home every morning at 4 a.m. And it was dark and nobody needed me. And I wasn't getting tons of texts. Nobody was pinging me on social media. It was just peaceful. And I'd make a cup of coffee and I'd sit down and I'd try to write for 3 or 4 hours. And then by 8 o'clock, I was done. I didn't think about the book for the rest of the day. And then the following morning, I did the same thing. And I even did it on weekends. I literally did it. And, it's funny. In the beginning, it was hard. There I am. I'm with my coffee. It's like, oh shit, now what do I do? And by 2 weeks in, I had no writer's block. It's like one of the things I started doing is by 7 o'clock, I would write a note to myself that says, this is what, at some point I would say, this is what I want to write about tomorrow. I'm not going to worry about it now, but I'd give myself a task. And then I'd grab my coffee the following morning. I'd say, okay, where was I? And I'd see the note from me saying, here's what you should write about today. So I literally chunked the thing up and decided to have that kind of discipline, because otherwise and one of the reasons I did that is, unlike some books, I just felt urgency to get this thing out now because we're divided now, because politics is so heated now, because I feel like we have to turn down the heat now. So for me, I had huge urgency to get this thing done. And I thought that if I didn't have the discipline, I'd be sitting around and it would be 2022 and I'd have 1/3 of it done. But, I'm glad I did that. The only negative was that now, the book is done, but I still sometimes I'll just automatically, I'll like wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It'll be pitch black and I'll be saying to myself, Diane, you don't need to wake up now. You don't need to write anything. But I got so used to it that, it kind of changed how my body works.
Yeah, that is very disciplined. I don't know if I could get to that level where I at the 4 a.m. wake up, especially on weekends. That would be, yeah, that sounds really tough. But yes, thank you so much for the insights about journalism and writing, because I always have a hard time like kind of getting help in those two areas,
Yeah.
just at school and stuff like that. So I think it's really interesting with your perspective. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I
Yeah.
think Josie has a question. If she wants to.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for
Hi,
speaking with us.
Josie.
This was really cool and interesting to talk to. And I'm kind of curious what types of different responses you would get when working with people across the political spectrum. Like, I'm sure you talk about this in your book a little bit, and I promise I will get it from the
Oh,
library.
no.
I've been looking for a good book to read. So I was kind of curious how you like the responses that you would hear from people across the political spectrum, and when did they surprise you, and when did you think that their responses didn't match with the ideology that you associated with them?
I have stories. Look, sometimes what people said was super predictable. The what that people said was pretty predictable. The why, was interesting. So, all of my voters thought that character. So let's go back to Donald Trump days. My Trump voters talked ad nauseum about how important character was to them, and that it was the primary factor in why they would pick a candidate. And I would say, but really, help me understand. I don't know how you think about character when it comes to Donald Trump. Like, what about all of the lies? And they would say to me, Diane, wake up. All politicians lie. And I would say, like, really? And they'd say, yeah, like Bill Clinton, I did not have sex with that woman. Like Barack Obama, you can pick your doctor. I mean, they literally had everything figured out. They believe that people run for office, they go to Washington, they cut corners, they make deals, they schmooze, and they're all corrupt. And there are a lot of people who feel that way. So for me, it was more a degree thing. Like I thought, oh, Washington Post, 15,000 lies to a couple of lies, but they believe this is basically just a dishonest group of people. And I thought that was really fascinating. And even on the issues, I mean, I tell the story of one of my voters who was a very, very conservative Republican, pro-life from Alabama. And about a year ago, he texted me and said, "Can we talk live?" And I called him, and he told me that his 15-year-old daughter came home on Friday and told the family that she was pregnant. And they sat down and they prayed. And, again, he's pro-life. And he told me that that day she had had an abortion. And I said to him, wow, I said, this is like unbelievable with everything that you've told me about. I mean, this is a guy who was a single issue abortion voter. Like if there was someone who was pro-choice and agreed with him on every other issue, he would not have voted for that person. And I said to him, I just don't get it. I mean, where did this come from? And he said, well, look, it's different from the way Democrats think about abortion. I said, really? Like, how is that? He said, well, the way Democrats think about it is they wouldn't have taken it so seriously. Like our family, we prayed. It was like the most excruciating decision. And that's not how Democrats see it. And his perception is that people who are pro-choice just walk around going, I don't know. I had sex last night. Oh, well, I guess I'll have an abortion. I had one last week, but if I have to have one next week, that's okay too. They thought that it was a casual, easy decision rather than something which for the other side was equally excruciating. So I think that's the kind of stuff that happened over and over again that people just surprised me with things that they said that weren't part of the stereotypes. I also thought on foreign policy, for any of you who are foreign policy geeks, the foreign policy stuff is really, okay, Greg, the foreign policy stuff is so fascinating to me. I would every once in a while, every 6 months, I'd make a whole list of issues and I'd say to everybody, give me your top 5 issues. Give me your top 10 issues. Foreign policy never even made the top 10. Just unbelievable. So Americans, and I think, Americans are like so US centric. And those of you who are on this call, if you were born in other countries, you probably see this all the time. It's like, we don't know the names of leaders of other countries. People say they not only can't find Kabul on a map, Americans can't find Afghanistan on a map, etc. But it is never in the top 10. I would ask them about NATO. People didn't really know what NATO stood for. They didn't know a lot about what it did, just that, Trump got people, all countries to pay a little bit more in terms of their dues. And by the way, this is Republicans and Democrats. But here's a quick story that I heard that helped me understand this. So one of my voters told me that his nephew had gotten into college, was a freshman in college, and he lived in Eastern Pennsylvania. The college that he was going to was 4 hours west of their home. So when his nephew and the family went to go to college, the family stopped at this voter's house 2 hours in to break up the trip. In other words, they had never really been 4 hours west of Broomall, Pennsylvania, which is where this kid lived. They had never been 4 hours west. So they literally stopped after 2 hours to break up the trip. So my voter, whose name is Jim, says to me, do you think they know where Ukraine is? He said, there's no way that Donald Trump was ever going to be impeached because, a lot of people, they don't even know where Ukraine, like not only are they not able to fathom what happened with such a complicated issue, but they don't even know where the country is because they haven't even been 4 hours west. I don't think you can look down on people for this. I think this is okay, everybody. If you are surprised about that, like I was, you have to realize that you're living in a bubble, that there are a lot of Americans who don't have the life that you have. There are a lot of Americans who have never been 4 hours west. I had another voter, a woman who was told me she was in Arizona, but she told me she grew up in Northwest Idaho. The town that she grew up with not only didn't have any people of color in it, there were no brunettes. everyone was blonde. And she went to Boise State University. And she said, I got there and she said it was unbelievable. There's every hair color, every skin color. People are from 35 different countries. She said, I was in heaven. I had never had this kind of experience before. It was so exciting. So of course, this is like a made for TV movie. She starts going out with a guy from Lebanon. And she brings him home to her parents in Northwest Ohio. And the parents were freaking out. They were afraid of having this guy there. And ultimately, they basically said to her, look, it's either him or us. We can't, this is like too scary for us. And she left and moved to Arizona. And I think she's in touch with her family now. But when you hear educated Americans vote, college educated Americans vote this way, and not uneducated Americans vote this way, it's not smart and stupid. It's just that some people's life circumstances are such that they've never been in an environment that opens their eyes to all of the different kinds of people and perspectives in the world. And you get to the point where, like this woman's family, you're literally afraid of anything that's different from what you've been used to, and that's within 15 minutes of where you grew up. I think those stories are really poignant because, it reminds me that I'm sitting here in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm looking outside. There are cars whizzing by. There are people running around with college t-shirts and everything. There's, a bar over there. There's a bar over there. There's a bar behind me. It's a different world. Somebody would say, what's your life like? I could say, well, I have kind of a normal life. Like, here's what I do. I work, I've got kids, I do all of this, but it's totally different, and sometimes scary from what other clusters of our country have. And I think we need to value that and understand that and treat people with dignity, because they are our fellow Americans. And these are not awful people. It's just, we all, and I shouldn't be awful to them. It's just that our lives and our perspectives are different. And, it's just so fascinating to be talking to them. What's the allegory of the cave?
Oh, yes. I forgot where if you're looking at your shadow, and then he goes outside and sees.
Oh,
It's about learning about new perspectives and a new environment from the one that you currently lived in, or the one that you're familiar with. It's not about that.
Yeah, I
think
forgot
that's
about
very
that. It's
true.
exactly like that. Or the one about where you touch the elephant. Yeah.
I don't know if I know that one,
Yeah.
but I definitely know the one about the cave. I think that totally, it's a great
Yeah,
comparison
that's
with.
Plato. That's
Yeah.
Plato. Not Play-Doh. Plato. Like the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. I also have a chapter in the book. I did a deep dive with millennials, but I'm really, really fascinated by low voter turnout rates among young people. And I think what all of you are doing is so important. The data behind why people who are young don't vote is super depressing. People say things like, I'm too busy. I had an exam that day. I'm too busy. I pulled an all-nighter and I needed to sleep. It's just, and part of it is that people feel that their vote doesn't matter. It's like, well, I live in a blue state. I live in California. My state's going to be blue anyway, therefore I shouldn't vote. Or there are no candidates out there that really represent what I really think needs to happen. And one of the things, right, Patrick, we could all vote by mail anyway, so those are good excuses. But it's, one of the things that I always say to young people is the way that you get power is to vote. And what I mean by that is, like, I spoke to a college class a couple of weeks ago, and I said, look, I know what your issues are. You're all worried about student loan debt. You're worried about whether you're going to be able to get a job. You're worried about this. You're worried about this. You're worried about this. Nothing's going to happen. It's not happening. And the reason is that no one will lose an election because they didn't pay attention to you because you don't vote. On the other hand, I'm a baby boomer. I'm the age of your parents, or maybe even older. I will tell you, if anybody decided that they wanted to cut back Social Security or make the age at which you get Social Security older, like instead of 65, 70, which actually I think would be a really good idea, they would completely lose an election because the baby boomers vote. They would vote that person out immediately. So it's not really a chicken egg thing. It's when you have the power and people know you are a powerful voting bloc, then you have a voice. And there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity. I think the youth of our country and the youth of our world have brought climate change to the fore. The message that says the world that we will inherit from you makes me scared is such a powerful message. And there's huge, I have a chapter on the book, there's huge common ground on climate change. Because most Americans have children and grandchildren, and they look at them and say, yes, actually, that's really, really important. So voices matter, and voting creates power. It's not that, once you have the power, then you'll vote. It actually doesn't work that way.
Definitely. And yeah, we couldn't agree more that voting is power. Next, I want to get to Greg. If you still have your question, we'd love if you could ask it.
Yeah. I've had it for a good 20 minutes now. Number one, you're amazing. I had no idea who you were before the Zoom call, but I'm a fan, Miss Hessan. So my question is, I'm a senior going into college. I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I want to do everything, see all the opportunities that I can get. But how should we prepare? How should I prepare for a life where I don't know what I want to do in the future? How do you navigate in that sea of uncharted territory?
Yeah. I can totally relate to what you're saying. I grew up, I had a younger brother when he was 2 years old. He got one of those black plastic doctor kits, and I was the older sister. I tore the thing open. I took out a stethoscope. I put it around his neck. And, all of a sudden my brother just decided he wanted to be a doctor at 2 years old. And he spent his entire life he just was good in science, and he went to med school, and he's been a surgeon for, 30, 40 years. And I always hated him for that because I thought most people were like my brother, and that I was the one who never knew what to do. As it turns out, most people haven't a clue about what they want to do, and they're just not brave enough to say it on a Zoom call the way you are. And I think if you're in that situation, my advice to you is that your life will be more interesting, because when you don't know what's going to do, and some opportunity comes up, or somebody connects you with someone, or the universe just throws something at you, if you're really, really directed, you ignore all the other interesting opportunities because you're just going for being a surgeon. But for me, I've had 12 different careers. I've been an entrepreneur, I've been a corporate executive, I've been a journalist, I've been an angel investor. I go on. And I think I got 5 things ahead of me. But it's only because somebody would come to me with some outrageous idea, and I think, I don't know, maybe I'll quit my job and go do that, or whatever. Or, I was in college. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I didn't know what, being a lawyer was, et cetera. But somebody said to me, Diane, come to this panel. There's going to be a panel about what it's like to get an MBA, which I had never heard of way back when. And what I really wanted to do was the equivalent of not go. It was cold outside. I just wanted to put a blanket around me and, do the equivalent of binge watching Game of Thrones. And instead, I went to that panel and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. This would be the kind of thing, that I want to do. So much of my life has been serendipity. And my advice to you is, don't worry if you don't know what you want to do. Create situations in which serendipity can show up for you. Go to the panel, go to the party and meet other people. Get on the Zoom call, with people who you don't know. Take the trip, try something else or whatever. And, things will show up in your life. Early in your career, if you're lucky, you're going to go to college and you're going to get a great advisor who really, really helps you think about what makes you happy and what you want to do in the beginning of your life. Or you'll get a job with a manager that kind of has your back and that pushes you and all that. But, if you don't have the advisor and you don't have the manager, someone will show up. But it's great, it's great to get an early start. So go to college. I always say to people say, oh, you went to Harvard Business School, what's your advice? And my advice is don't work so hard, make friends, because the people who are in your class will be really successful in their careers, and they'll be able to hire you and do deals with you and partner with you and build companies with you and everything else. So, make friends, stay in touch with your teachers, and don't have one mentor, have a zillion people, who you can rely on to just answer a quick question or, give you some advice at some point, and trust that things will show up, because for most of us, our lives were not intentional. Things did not turn out exactly the way they planned, unless life was boring. I mean, there are people who say, I want to be a lawyer, and then they go to law school and they've been working in a law firm forever, or they do the same thing if they're an accountant. But most people are not like that. And some of the happiest people I know are the ones that just had no idea, but just kind of figured it out. And I really think that life is long. We have so many chapters. If you're in Boston and you say, name me one female entrepreneur, people might say Diane Hesson. I mean, they might literally say my name. I've been around here for so long. And yet I didn't even start my first company until I was in my 40s. So you have plenty of time. Get off of social media where it looks like everybody is doing better than you are, because they aren't. They aren't. It all works out fine.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Diane. Want to be super respectful of your time. I know that we said 5:45, but if you are available, I know we have a couple more questions, but no pressure at all if you have to head.
How about if I can do 5 more minutes because I have a 6 o'clock meeting. So let's
go Santiago real quick.
Okay. Hi, Diane. It's been a pleasure listening to you. I had a question. It's not it's like, if you were if you had the opportunity to become a member of the Senate or become a member of the House of Representatives, which one would you choose?
Neither. I think they sound like the most horrible jobs. If I were going to see, so for me, because everybody says, oh, I love your book, you should run for office. There's no way I'm doing that. I just think campaigning sounds horrible. If I were going to pick a political job, I would be a governor or a mayor. I mean, I like being an executive and an operator. I like saying, here's my vision, here are my priorities, let's go and let's do it. And having control over who's on my team and how much budget I have and everything else. I would not want to be sitting around trying to make a decision with a group of 500 people who all have vested interests. I think that sounds incredibly painful. So that's why I said neither. I think it's a lot more fun to be able to kind of chart your own destiny.
And I guess before I think we have time for Patrick as well. If you want to ask your question.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And thank you again, Diane, for this very insightful meeting. It was really helpful. But I had a question. You said you're in Boston. Me, I have to go to college next year and stuff. And I was thinking of going in a big urban city, where the life of work is very prominent. How would you say is life around all those skyscrapers and all those work buildings and everything? Yeah. It sounds fun, but I don't know.
Well, I think, Johnny, you would probably agree with me, but to me, I mean, I grew up in Norristown, Pennsylvania. It's a steel town about 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia. I will tell you that Boston is the greatest college town in the world. It's just unbelievable here because there are 60 colleges and universities here. Wow. So I'd get on public transportation in Boston when I was in college, and I'd see people my age and I'd think they were tourists. I mean, the city is so oriented to young people, and there are all kinds of schools. There are big schools. Here's what you have to decide with college. Do I want a big school or a small school? Do I want the city or do I want the country? That's your decision. Yeah. And it's great to come here to look at schools, even if you don't agree with me and you don't love Boston, just because you can come to Boston and spend 5 days, and you can look at Northeastern and BU and see large, sprawling urban schools where your dorm, is in a big, tall city building and you don't have a lot of grass. And then you can go to the suburbs and you can look at Tufts and you can look at Babson and look at Bentley and look at Wellesley, which are, beautiful, beautiful campuses with brick buildings, just like in the movies, and make a decision as to whether that's better, than kind of the rush that you get from being in the city. And do you want to be in a school where there are 30,000 students, where it feels to some people overwhelming? Or do you want to be in a school where there are 2,000 students, where to some people that feels super boring because by the end of 2 years, everybody on campus and what else is there? So I think that's a lot of it. And most of those decisions are gut feel. Like I hear people all the time say things like, I want to go to like a Big Ten school. I want to go to a school where I'm like going to the football games and watching the cheerleaders and getting shit-faced on weekends and drinking beer. And, you hear other people say, oh my gosh, that like sounds like my biggest nightmare. And I'd look at those things. How big, how small, how urban, how rural. Do you want to be in an absolutely gorgeous campus in the middle of freaking nowhere? Right. One of the reasons I went to Tufts is I didn't know, I couldn't answer any of those questions. I just wanted best of all worlds. So Tufts has like 5,000. It wasn't too big, wasn't too small. It was very, very close to the city, but it still had a campus. I mean, I picked that. It was like Goldilocks, right? Not too, not too hot, not too cold, just right. But I think those are the decisions that you have to make. So when you're looking at colleges, find a city where you can see examples of all of those in one place. And it will come to you. I'm a city person. I've lived in the city for most of my life. When I raised my kids, I wanted to live in this. I had to live in the suburbs for a while to raise my kids. I came right back into the city, but I didn't want to be in the city for college. I wanted beautiful buildings and statues, and I wanted to sit on a lawn and play Frisbee and not have it run over by a car. So it just varies, but you'll figure it out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diane.
All right,
we don't want to keep
everybody.
you any longer, but I'm gonna.
I know I have to run and do something
Yes.
else, but good luck, everybody. And
thank you so much.
Thank you for all the really great questions. If there's anything else that I can do to support you, just scream.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you so much for being flexible with us.
Okay.
All the best. Thank you so much.
Bye.
And we'll be attaching the link to Diane's website in the chat once again, just so you can go get her book if you're interested. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and if any of you have any questions about new voters or want to keep showing up to our events, we're probably going to have a college panel soon with some people from New Voters who are already in college, where you can ask questions, etc. Be on the lookout. And if you are not already part of a New Voters Fellows Program, become a part of the Fellows Program so that you can keep up to date on these kind of events. And happy to answer any questions. Thank you all for coming. Take care, guys. Bye.